server and the state of the server's progression. At the very beginning of the wipe, typically the first 2 hours, nobody has guns and most people have wooden bows and spears. This is what we call Prim stage. After Prim, there's tiers 1, 2, and 3. In tier 1, you have access to revolvers and crossbows. Tier 2, you get access to more automatic guns and better armor. And tier 3, you get access to the most powerful gear in the game. You can also look at the map and see that most spots that are low tier or Prim are not close to monuments.
In Rust, microeconomics is when an individual makes choices based on his current situation. In some cases, you might have a lot of loot you choose to use, some of your raw resources to protect your base from raids and other players. Maybe you don't have a lot of loot, so you go on scrap runs to farm and strengthen your base, but sometimes you also go to monuments and points of interest in order to gather more loot, but have less ability to gather resources and have the higher possibility to die losing that loot due to other players.
Rust has many items, but some of them are either impossible to craft or take a lot of resources. These things, like C4 explosives and rockets, are highly sought after because they let you blow into others' bases. Every type of explosive is made using a component called sulfur, and the way you acquire sulfur is to farm it off the nodes that spawn around the map. The important difference between sulfur nodes and stone nodes is that sulfur drops less per node and the nodes are less likely to spawn. There are other things like guns that require a lot of resources to make, like the AK, which needs 50 high quality metal and a rifle body, each of which are difficult to acquire. The last thing are the military grade guns that are impossible to get out of anywhere but high level crates that either take 15 minutes to open or come with the added challenge of fighting strong NPCs.
In Rust, there are many things that go into a successful wipe. These factors of production are very essential to all players. For natural resources, there are animals that spawn along with nodes of metal, sulfur, stone, and wood, from trees that give you resources for building and explosives. There are also naturally spawning barrels and crates that give you scrap and components for crafting items. There is also land which you can use to therefore set up your base. Slave labor. For capital, there are a few types of things. Firstly, tools that you can use to farm more efficiently and get ahead of other players. There are also things like furnaces, campfires, oil refineries, large variants of furnaces, and workbenches that let you craft better items and refine oil. And finally, for entrepreneurship, we take the resources and explosives that we collected in labor and land and use it to destroy other people's bases efficiently and fast. Essentially, train go boom.
In Rust, the optimizing individual makes the most out of his time by prioritizing progression. In some cases, this means going to large monuments to acquire loot, or gaining sulfur to make explosives to raid other people's bases, and take their loot instead. The optimizing individual also makes sure his base is strong to avoid getting raided. If you use your time well, and maybe get a few good kills, you will be a force to be reckoned with on the server.
In Rust, there are places where people can trade scrap and other resources. In the Outpost, you can trade scrap for things like a wind turbine for power and auto turrets and SAM sites to fortify your base. You can also buy things like jackhammers, which are not craftable and is the best way to farm nodes. Players can also set up vending machines to advertise their own items for self-determined prices. This allows for a completely free market to form on the island.
In Rust, it's no secret that you need resources to progress. However, getting these resources that you need cannot be done all at once. For example, you can decide whether to farm for raw resources like stone and metal to better your base, or go on scrap runs to improve your weaponry and learn new items to craft and then use them in combat. You can also take your best gear and go on PvP runs to try to take other people's stuff.